Hi, everyone. I am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast, where anything can be possible, because when you believe you can, you will. This series is all about getting honest with ourselves and noticing the things that we carry with us. We each have our own life experiences to go from, and sometimes it's hard to truly understand what it's like to be someone else. What we can do to create change is to start with us. If each of us took one action each day in our own lives, we could collectively change the world around us. But what does it take? It takes work, it takes practice, and we have to be honest with ourselves as we get there. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Bonnie Stewart, who heads up the dynamic team of professionals at the Connecticut Society of CPAs, which represents almost approximately 6,000 individuals in public practice, business and industry, government, education, and more. In her role as Executive Director and CEO, Bonnie works with the Connecticut CPA Board of Directors to lead and grow the organization, engage, empower, and advance its members, the profession, the business community, and future CPAs. Before joining the Connecticut Society, Bonnie served as Vice President of Government and Public Affairs and General Counsel for the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, and in the office of the Connecticut Attorney General. She received her Juris Doctorate from the Franklin Pierce Law Center in Concord, New Hampshire, and her Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Connecticut. During this interview, we talk about her journey and the impact that her father, her family, and also her executive coach has had along the way in developing her as a leader and an advocate for the profession. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I'm here with Bonnie Stewart, the Executive Director and CEO of the Connecticut CPA Society. Bonnie, thanks for being on. Would love for you to just introduce yourself to our listeners before we get started.
Thank you. I have been with the society. This is my 5th year. Prior to that, I worked for corporate America, and I was a lobbyist, and I'm a lawyer, and I'm a mother, and I like to do bunches of things, but primarily traveling, I would say, and lacrosse, whether I be watching it or trying to play it with friends and children. I've got lots of things to keep me busy. I just don't have enough time in the day.
I know. I always say that work gets in the way. I know whenever retirement eventually comes, there'll be plenty to keep me busy.
It's funny because everyone I know says that they're busier now that they're retired than they were when they were working.
Yes.
So I'm going to hope that doesn't happen to me and that I've got time to do all the things that I want to do.
Exactly. Yeah. So great. Well, thank you so much for being on. And so during this podcast, it's really about your story, and would love to start off just basically talking about where you grew up, what your parents did. Just give me a little bit of your family background.
Sure. So I grew up here in Connecticut. I lived in a border town, so I was born just across the line in Rhode Island, but was brought right home to Connecticut, where my family has been since the 1600s. We
Really
are big travelers, and so throughout my life, I took advantage of school to travel, and I went to school in England. I went to school in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I got my degree from the University of Connecticut, and I've always, despite my travels all over the world, returned home. And I have my entire family here.
So what did your parents do? What were their occupations?
So both of my parents were teachers, and my dad was also a lawyer.
Oh, okay. So that's where you got your background there.
Yes, my mother actually went to law school as well, but decided that she really didn't need to do that later in life, and that she had other things she wanted to do. But we do have a number of people in the family that are lawyers and teachers.
Okay. And what did they teach?
My father taught political science and history. It used to be called social studies. It's referred to as many things now. And my mother
in high school?
In junior high school and high school, and taught at the college level as well. And my mother taught junior high school French and English.
Oh, okay. Great. And then you said your family has been there since the 1600s. What's that story?
Actually, we were my history in terms of my ancestry. One of my ancestors was the very first person to be born in the United States. That came over on the Mayflower. I guess I had
Oh,
somebody probably
wow.
pregnant on the Mayflower. Not something I would want to have had to deal with. But they hit land, and the child was born a couple of days later. And I guess we waddled down from Massachusetts to Connecticut, and we pretty much stayed here ever since.
Wow. That's quite the history. So your grandparents then were they live around you?
Yes, my entire family lives in southeastern Connecticut. Everyone's gone off at some point and um, lived somewhere else and gone to school somewhere else or work somewhere else, but everyone eventually comes home.
Yeah. So how many siblings do you have?
I'm one of four children. I have three brothers, two older and one younger, and we've had a number of our friends, my brothers and I, that have come to live with us as well across the years. So while I have a core family in terms of four brothers, I do have what I consider a very close extended family, not only of their spouses and their children, but also of the others who still return to our home for Christmas and Thanksgiving and stuff. So in total, I would tell you I'm one of seven.
Okay. So was that your parents bringing people over or what? How did that happen?
You know, we had friends that, for example, we live in a town where, or an area where there's a large naval base. And when people were in high school, we had a couple that did not want to leave for their senior year. And so their parents and my parents agreed to have them, finish out their high school years with us.
Oh, okay.
Or we had my brother had another friend who's was very close and thought that things might be better residing with us for a while, and did so. So it's nice to have a place where everyone gets together and enjoys each other's company.
Yeah, that is nice. So what were your hobbies growing up?
I would say travel has always been amongst my biggest hobbies. My parents were wanderers, even though we always returned to Connecticut. We've lived here. In the summertime, when my parents were teachers, they'd throw us in the back of a station wagon and we'd visit the country. We would go from state park or national park to national park, or my father would do grant work at different universities, and we'd get to go and spend time in Michigan or time in Ohio, et cetera. But because of that, not only myself, but all the grandchildren, we have all seen all 50 states. And then after we did that, they started taking us elsewhere. So very, very fortunate that travel has been a big part of a life, because I think that it just opens your eyes in a manner that if you stay in the same area all the time, you really just don't have a chance to experience.
For
In addition,
sure.
in addition to that, I would say sports were a big issue in our family. We all enjoy sports, and while we may not all enjoy playing the same sports, we're big UConn basketball fans. And actually, my parents, on their wedding anniversary, went to the University of Connecticut and the University of Rhode Island football game after they got married. So we are big, I would say, UConn supporters, and through that, a lot of college sports, but we like other things as well. We're big into the outdoors. We like to hike. We like to go for walks. We like to canoe. Water sports are big. Love snorkeling. Just really an active family. Love zip lining. Looking forward to being able to start traveling again and try some of the lines I've not tried in the past. And animals. Animals were a big part growing up. I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian until I met organic chemistry in college. That changed my mind. I became a lawyer instead. But I mentioned to my father I wanted to be a vet. So next thing I knew, I got a little sheep. I got a pig. I had a couple of things, and we had a little country farm, and that was great until my parents were on a cruise and the pig got loose, the piglets, because we had a batch of them. and rooted up the lawn. They dug up the whole lawn. My father said, well, it's your pigs, you replant the lawn. And he made me spend the summer replanting the lawn. I got rid of the pigs shortly after that.
Yeah, I bet that's a good lesson, right? So you said you went to school in other countries. How did that happen when younger? Were your parents suggesting it, or was it something you found?
I don't know how it came up initially, but I do remember discussing with my parents going to school overseas, and in London in particular. My father had friends in London. My father was a Fulbright scholar and had actually gone to school with that in India for a little while. But I'd met a lot of people in England and kept in touch. And so I had mentioned that I would like to go to school. And I think the school I was going to had a program in England. And so my father called up, said, if we send her over, would you be willing to, watch her for the next year? And they said yes. And so my father sent me over to University of London for my junior year of college. And so that was great. When I came home, at one point, I decided I wanted to be a social worker. And my father said, well, if you're going to do that, you need to learn the language. And therefore, you should go to the University of Puerto Rico, because in this area of the country, the dialect that's spoken most often is the Puerto Rican dialect. And therefore sent me to the University of Puerto Rico to learn Spanish. And that's where I met my husband. He was a TA in one of my classes. But I did that, and that was just a fantastic experience as well. So I got to see those countries and learn them very well. And while I was in the Caribbean, got to travel all over down there. And the same thing with Europe during the breaks and summer vacations, etc. I was able to backpack all around England. Different time, different age, where things like that were a bit safer than they are now. But it was just fantastic opportunities with lots of great memories.
So how did your switch to law happen? So you wanted to be a veterinarian, then a social worker. So where did that shift happen?
I don't ever remember saying I wanted to be a lawyer. I think that was actually my father's idea. You know what? There was a social worker who worked for Neighborhood Legal Services, where I was working as a intern while I was working towards a degree in social work. And she actually said to me, I'm a social worker, but we work here with a bunch of attorneys. And I want you to know that you could actually serve your clients better if you were an attorney. I said that to my father when I got home. And the next thing I knew, my LSAT form had been filled out. So I did it. I don't know that I knew I wanted to do it, but I actually had a conversation with my father on a couple of occasions, because I did switch my mind about what I wanted to do. And I remember one day coming home from school and being very upset that I really didn't know what I wanted to be. I had all these ideas, but I just didn't know. And I was going to switch my major again, and I was upset about that. And my father said, that's what school's all about. You go there to learn things. You try, co-ops and internships. Most people do not know what they really want to be. They want to be something at one point in time, but it may change several times. And he told me how he changed from what he initially went to school for to something else and something else. And so I sat for the LSATs, and he told me about non-traditional jobs as well as traditional lawyer jobs. I became a lawyer, but my first true job after graduating was actually being a lobbyist, where they required you be a lawyer, but it wasn't in the traditional role. So I have to say that degree has served me very well. The preparation for becoming a lawyer, the different things you have to do with moot court, and just the different things you study, it just brought me just a lot of knowledge in many different areas that have given me the opportunities that I've had to, whether it be a lobbyist, become general counsel at an organization, become the CEO of the current organization I'm at. I really think that it was a good move on my father's part to fill out that LSAT form for me.
Yeah, I'll say. So what was it? So you went to law school, and what were you lobbying for? What organization did you get involved with?
So when I was in law school, I was working at the Connecticut Attorney General's office, and I received a call from somebody who had also interned there before me and said that they were with the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, and would I be interested in speaking to them about possibly lobbying? And I thought, well, that's interesting. My father was heavily involved in politics. I thought that's a good way to combine um, what I initially wanted to do, my love of working with people and possibly social work, et cetera, with my schooling, being a lawyer, and my father's influence in terms of politics. If you want to change the world, you can't do that by sitting at home. You can't even change the rules surrounding who can use the baseball field. So speak up or shut up. And so I went for the interview, and I thought this would be really neat. This is a lot better than sitting in the back room of the Attorney General's office writing briefs for somebody else to go and present. So I said, let's try it. And I stayed with that organization for a long time. I went in as staff attorney and I left as general counsel.
Oh,
And
wow.
it gave me a lot of opportunities. I learned a lot. I had a lot of experiences there that allowed me to learn different areas of the law, because businesses are touched by so many different things. And with that, also grow in terms of my leadership experience, because as I was there, I received management training and other things. So that was pretty interesting. And like I said, I was there for a long, long time.
So what was your expectation going in versus what the reality was as you moved through into leadership positions? What did you have to, were there different belief systems you had to change along the way in order to lead in the way that you needed to, or get people to come to an agreement together?
I would tell you that I'd always been told, listen. That's one of the most important things anybody can ever do. So I would listen, and I learned a lot by listening. I learned more about the law. I learned more about people, just many different things. But in terms of my ability to be a good manager, I think that came actually later. I think I became a very good lobbyist. I became an expert in certain areas of the law. I was a fantastic employee because I've got a great work ethic. But I don't know that I was a great manager for a long time. I think that after I left that organization, I actually got a coach, and that coach was really good about telling me, giving me advice such as, it's fine to listen, but how do you use that? Are you observing how people are feeling? Are you reading the room? And I'd be like, absolutely, you do that as a lobbyist. But I've always been pretty private about not my life as a whole. Everyone knows about my family, but I'm a diabetic, and I've always kept that very quiet until I switched jobs, and I'm not sure why. But I had other people that had, I know why. I had other people that had some health issues, and they're always worried about, are you going to hold that against them, or if they need time off to go to the doctors, et cetera. And I would always say no, but I'd never tell them that I understand or anything. And I realized that if I shared a little bit, they'd feel more comfortable, whether it be going to a doctor's appointment or wanting to take time off to go see your child play in a game, or take your parents to a medical appointment. We all have obligations now, whether it be for parents, children, nephews, yourself, your spouse, your dog. I've had to take time off to take my dog to the doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that people are much more willing to be loyal to an organization and put the time in that's needed if you're willing to back them up when they need time for whatever it is. So I think my abilities to, I think there's always been there to lead people. I did that as a lobbyist, leading numerous coalitions, et cetera. I had a great team of attorneys working with me in our office. But I think my ability to manage and help develop people and coach people really came about more in the last 5 years after I got some coaching myself. And then with COVID, realizing that I needed to pay a lot more attention, not to the person just as an employee, but as a person and the struggles that they were facing. Because during COVID, you had people that had children at home that they were trying to take care of as they did their job, or teach as they did their job. I was just very appreciative of the fact that my children were already out of school when COVID hit, because that was a major, major challenge for those parents who were home and still trying to work. Many of them didn't have the choice to leave the work world. So being flexible was really important to them. But I would have wanted someone to do that for me. But I think people were nervous at first about accepting my offers to, take on flexible work, etc. But then as they saw that I might have needed to do that, like for a little while on Tuesday mornings, I was taking 2 hours off to take someone to the doctors. They saw me do that. I'd make up my 2 hours later, I'd get my job done. But as they saw that and I was more open about it, they too started doing it. And as a result, I have to say I've got an incredibly loyal team, because I understand the challenges of their lives, whether it be work or home, to a much better extent than I ever did before.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's when we show more authenticity and vulnerability, it actually brings us closer to the people around us. I think, I know when I was younger, there was always this thing, if you're a leader, there's a line, and you had to kind of keep that line, which never came naturally to me, because I am someone that likes to be friends with people, and so forth. So, what I found over time was the same thing, is you start realizing, whether it's your clients or people that work with you or for you, there's more of a bond and an understanding when things aren't going well too in a day.
Right. Exactly. I remember you never shared anything that was personal, that stayed home and work came to work. So, and you never asked anybody.
Right.
But in COVID, if you didn't ask people how they were, other than that normal artificial, how you doing today?
Right.
I'm walking. If you did not ask people how they were, it was a mistake. It was a mistake. And I didn't want people to think I was intruding either. But I'll tell you that people started saying it means a lot. And as you hear that, it makes you understand how the old ways just don't work now.
Right. It's so true. So what was your transition from being a lobbyist to, I can see that advocacy piece being part of a state society, but how did you end up with the Connecticut CPA Society?
So some of the people that I worked with at my other organization were also members of the state society. And a couple of the members recruited me to come over to the society, primarily because I had a lot of touches with the business world, and they wanted to maintain. We have a lot of members in business and industry, but there's always concerns about maintaining them, because people view the societies primarily as an organization for public firms.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the case, but that's the impression. So you have to deal, or perception. So you have to deal with that. And then my government relations experience, they wanted to build the program that the society had. So those were the two primary reasons they wanted to meet with me initially. And as I learned more about the job and the people, it was something that I was definitely interested in. What I think is so amazing is my perception of accountants. I always thought that the individuals that I worked with on tax issues, et cetera, were different. I worked with a number of people that were outgoing, and they were funny and everything. And I just thought of accountants as very serious individuals, and anybody that wasn't that way was the exception. And I have to say that the CPA world as a whole, and I do mean as a whole, because in my position, I've had the opportunity not only to get to know the CPAs in Connecticut, but across the country, and now many throughout the world. And they are the most welcoming group of people I have ever worked with. They're more welcoming than my social worker groups, than my lawyer groups. And it's not that the other people don't care or whatever. I don't know what it is, but I think that the CPAs have more of a sense of community, both within the profession as well as a need to serve those communities in which they live, more than any other profession I've ever worked with. And what an opportunity, and just so fulfilling to be part of that community.
Yeah, I would say the same, you know, and it's the, I would say a double-edged sword for CPAs, because they are a very heartfelt profession. So they really care about their clients. They, you know, want to do the best that they can, but then they'll work themselves around the clock and not charge enough. So it's that same heartfelt feeling, like everyone's very passionate about the work that they do and trying to help people, which is, you know, what keeps us all in it. And, but, you know, at the same time, you know, realizing it's not a not-for-profit, and how you really get the CPA profession valued in the right way.
Right. No, I would agree with you. I don't know anyone that's not an incredibly hard worker in the profession. It's very true.
So what have you learned as far as your advocacy work that's different doing this than what you were doing before for business and industry?
So for the business and industry world, we had to touch a lot of different issues, but I don't know that we ever got into the nitty gritty of how things would actually work in the end. I would have thought that if you'd asked me then, I'd be like, oh yeah, we cover everything from A to Z. But now, representing the CPAs, when they look at a piece of tax legislation or audit standards, they look at it very differently. They look at it, can this be complied with in terms of the practical aspect of it?
Right.
And I don't ever remember seeing that before. We just assumed that the things we were pushing would be better than what was either already in place or what was being proposed by somebody else if we were trying to get a modification. But the CPAs not only look at it from the 50,000 foot level, but they go all the way down into the weeds. And if we're going to make suggestions about modifications to a law or adoption of new language, they've looked at everything from all the words in there to all the commas, periods, everything to make sure that it works.
Yes.
That's been very interesting, because we've gone back in legislation that I worked on in my prior life. We have tweaked at the society, and I have gone back to tweak after understanding the way it was actually interpreted by either the courts or an administrative agency. And I would have thought when I did it initially, I know I thought at the time that this will work and work well, but there were little nuances to it that, like I said, needed tweaking. So I think that CPAs are far more thorough than many people are in terms of dotting I's and crossing T's and making sure, again, that compliance is possible. I like the way that they think not only of themselves and their companies, but of the state as a whole, the state's economy as a whole. I think that a lot of the issues we work on may not be as, quote, sexy, but they are very rewarding, because you know you truly have made a difference after you've passed something. Yeah. And because your membership is so broad, we cover everybody from CPAs for towns, for governments, for nonprofits, for profits, for schools, for unions. You know, we have everybody. So you really get to know all sides of an issue much more so than you do when you're working for an organization, even though you are always trying to make sure you know all the arguments. I don't know that you ever can if you don't have someone from all those different stakeholder groups actually sharing the information with you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I do think that probably is a big difference, because CPAs have to live with every regulation that gets put, and you know, it directly affects their life and their clients' lives, and they see it play out wrong all the time. And people get upset, and they have to deal with, you know, their clients being upset when it's not their fault. It's just what you have to do. So it's a really good observation of, just a different perspective.
It is. It's interesting. I would have thought, again, if you'd asked me before, I thought about everything. We make sure we do A to Z, but it's just a different way of looking at things.
Yes. Yeah. So what, and I love, you talking about the executive coach and how it kind of, has shaped, even in that discussion, being more aware of, the stakeholder and what they're looking for versus what you're looking to do, where you're probably like, I could just get this thing through. Do we really need to keep hashing over this? But, at the end of the day, if you can't bring everyone along, then you can't really succeed as a leader. So what are some things that you've had to like monitor within yourself to make those changes? Like, you feel yourself going back to your habits or ways of doing things. How do you become aware that you're like, oh yeah, that I got to shift again?
I think the executive coach was the best thing that I ever did. There's a reason why, all the top CEOs in the world have one. Nobody is perfect, and everyone could always use someone to talk to and bounce ideas off of. And sometimes when you're at the top, you don't have a lot of people to do that, with. But I think that the thing that was most helpful is I'm probably harder on myself than anyone else is. And I'm not unique in that way. But when you are that way, you think you can be, superwoman. You can be the super mom, the super employee, anything you're doing, you want done right. And there's no reason why it's a bad thing to want to do everything well. But sometimes you put so much pressure on yourself, you become a workaholic and you're not paying attention to some other things that would give your life a little bit more balance. And in the end, probably make you a better person, a better worker, and many other things. And that's what my coach told me. You're really hard on yourself. You can't do everything. You're not superhuman. And I left thinking, well, that's foolish. I can do anything I want. And I went back a week later and said, what do you think I would scale back on or whatever? And he goes, well, I'm not necessarily scale back, but, learn how to delegate better. Learn how to do this, learn how to do that. Listen before you start suggesting some modifications here, because you may find that tweaks are actually more effective and more efficient than whole scale overdos, etc. So I think that the best thing that happened for me there was when I first started working, I was, I believe, the only woman in the room at a lot of the meetings. I was the only person ever in a suit that wasn't gray, black, or maybe blue or brown, I believe. I actually remember going to my first one in this beautiful Kelly green suit my mother gave me when I graduated from law school, and thinking, oh, wow, I shouldn't have worn this. I stand out. There was a big bowl of cigars in the middle of the table that we were meeting at. It was just a very different world. And I think to a certain extent, I felt like I had to prove myself. And after listening to him, I thought, you know what, I can be a good worker. I can be a good colleague, a good parent, a good manager without working 80 hours a week. When we go on vacation to Disneyland, I'm going to go with them the next time instead of sitting in the hotel room writing a new employee handbook or writing a new policy, etc. And so as a result of seeing this individual, I really believe that I gained work-life balance because I wasn't allowing it before. It wasn't that my employer wasn't, but in a much better manner than I ever had before. I always made it to my kids' games, but I'd be on the phone half the time or running back home and working at night after the kids went to bed. So I was, getting 3 hours of sleep. I believe that I finally, for the first time in my life, understood that I could be very good at everything I was doing and still have balance if I stopped being so hard on myself. That was really important because what I didn't understand, and he helped me with that as well, is that when you're like that with yourself, you put pressure on your colleagues to be the same way. So when somebody would say that to me before, I'd be like, that's not true. I don't ask that of them. I stay here. I'll get it done, and I was picking up other people's work. But he indicated, and I know it's true now, that if you're working like that and you're the leader or one of the managers, anybody that's working with you or around you feels you expect the same thing of them too.
Right.
So I would say that whole experience changed my life significantly, changed my family's life significantly, my friends and anybody that I work with. And I think for the better. I don't think I'm any less of an employee in terms of the quality, my standard or anything, but I'm more realistic about how much can be done in a day. And I pay more attention to who may need support and asking people, how can I help you? What can we do to support you? Do you need training? Do you need the afternoon off? Whatever the case may be, we'll get our job done, but we do it better when we understand that we all have limitations.
Right. Yeah. No, that's really good. Good. Yeah. So many good lessons in there. I like to close out the interview just asking you some rapid fire questions. So you pick a category: family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Family and friends. Okay.
Things or actions I don't have that I want with my family and friends.
More time. I think I missed too much of my family's lives and my friends' lives when I was, working nonstop. So I would love more time.
Yes. Things or actions that I do have that I want to keep.
A close extended family and good friends. I don't think people oftentimes appreciate how lucky they are to have that. My dad passed away in October.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I was so lucky in the last couple of days that it wasn't just me. And the same thing, with other family members. I've got 4 brothers who also chip in and do whatever we need. So it doesn't end up on one person the way it does in so many families.
Right.
So that I'm very lucky about. And to have friends call and say, how's it going? Are you okay? That means the world to me.
Yes, for sure. That's amazing. And your dad obviously had such a big effect on you and your career and your story. Things or actions I don't have that I don't want.
So I am so glad that none of my siblings or children ever wanted a rodent as a pet or a reptile. I hear these stories sometimes about parents who have to have snakes in their, in aquariums in their house, or my husband's got a friend that's got a scorpions, whatever. No, I'm so lucky because those freak me out. I don't do well with any of those. Rodents or reptiles I can leave behind.
That wouldn't happen in my house either. And last question, things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
That I do have that I don't want.
Maybe something that you want to stop doing or create another boundary.
I think that this is going to be a negative for me. I wish I could change the fact that I'm always too quick to say yes. That I'll help out, I'll go there, I'll do that, because I think that it's not always beneficial for the person I agree to help. And especially if it's something I really don't know how to do, I'm like, oh no, I'll come over. Yeah, I'll help. But also it ends up taking away from the things that I want to do. I don't mind helping people.
Yes.
But I never say no. And that's my biggest negative.
Yes. It can be, and that kind of goes back to the retirement discussion when I've actually done my business balance bliss talk for alumni organizations of colleges where people are retired and they're like, that's my problem is I can't put boundaries around this and I'm busier now. So
yeah. I think a lot of people are that.
Yeah. You want to please people, but then you don't really please, you don't please yourself and there's other people that are harmed from it, so right. Yeah, that's a good awareness. So with that, is there anything that you want to emphasize or that we haven't talked about today that you want people to leave this conversation knowing?
I would say one of the things that I raise a lot when I speak to women's groups, but I think this applies to both men and women now because so many men are caregivers as well, is that you don't need to be Superman or Superwoman if you want to have both a family and a career. That most times people put more pressure on themselves than their workplace ever does. And therefore, and the same is true with family. So take a look at yourself and see what you can do and should do, and don't feel like you need to do everything in every aspect of your life, because you'll have a much more fulfilling, less stressful, and just more satisfying life if you set reasonable objectives and goals for yourself. I think that's really important for all of us to know.
I completely agree. Well, thank you so much for spending time telling your story. There's so many great lessons for everyone to take away from this conversation.
Well, I appreciate your having me. I was surprised by the questions when I got them. I'm like, well, that's not what I thought. This is going to be fun. So
thank you very much.
Have a great day.
And now for my mindful moments with my interview with Bonnie, which had so many great takeaways. And first off, just really getting her background of her family and the way that she was brought up, having so much family around her, and also taking in other kids that lived in her community that needed the support of her family as well. Definitely taught her about nurturing others and seeing her parents as teachers. You could tell really affected her journey as a leader herself. One of the other things that was a big observation was her going overseas to school and her father promoting her to do that based on gaps that she had in her knowledge that would help her in the career that she was looking for. So, her first place that she went was to the University of London for a year of college. And I think that was great exposure into Europe and also into how others interact in different countries, and how you make new friends as well when you enter into a country that you're not from. And the second was when she went into social work, and her father advised her to go to the University of Puerto Rico, where she would learn Spanish and also understand the issues of that community. As a social worker, he felt that she would be affected by that. So what great advice to really step back as a mentor, whether you're a parent or a mentor outside of a family relationship, and really look at where can gaps be filled in and get alternative types of knowledge that goes beyond the classroom. And then she also worked at a neighborhood legal services group where she was doing social work during her internship, where she really learned and got advice there about becoming an attorney and getting her law degree. Of course, her father, who was an attorney, loved that idea. But that also, outside of your family background, when others step in and give advice on things that you can do to help grow in your career, I think it's so important that we utilize our knowledge to help younger people really find their path. And it really led into this whole world of being a lobbyist, of her being involved with that organization, and then she became a lobbyist for the business and industry organization, where she spent much of her career really trying to understand their issues and how to advocate for them. And her lesson from all of that was really learning how to listen. And in order to be a good manager, in order to advocate for people's issues, that you don't come in with preconceived notions, that you get yourself into a state where you can be open and aware and have ability to actually listen to the issues and find common themes so that you can solve for it. And she has noted as one of the most important things that she did when she left that organization was getting an executive coach. And that executive coach took that listening skill to another level and saying, how do you use what you have listened to? And are you in a state of actually observing how people are communicating, which is always more than the words that they say. It's their body language. It's so many things that we take into account when we're trying to get information to make a decision. She also talked about how important it was when she was more honest about her own personal issues, when she found out that others that she worked with had medical issues or family issues, where she can be more real. And all of that bonds us more to the people around us when we don't create that line or that division where we're in a different category and we're not human. It's very hard for people to be as committed when they don't feel like they know us from a human level. And so she talked about COVID really helping her to be more aware of how people were being affected, and that she noticed that she needed to change the way she was behaving so that she could ensure that people were taking the flexibility that they needed. So it's one thing to say that you are going to be flexible and give people flexible hours, but it's another thing if we're not actually doing that and doing it ourselves, then people don't think they have the permission to do what you're saying. So living what we preach is really important as a leader, and it goes a long way. So I just loved her observations of the accounting profession and how welcoming they've been to her, and also her different perspective of the way that they go about evaluating the same types of things she was doing in her other organization, but really looking at it from multiple perspectives to make sure that it will work. And so overall, I think in her story, the biggest thing was that she was learning not to put so much pressure on herself than anyone else would, and to really create that boundary or line in work-life balance so that she can reset and she's not stealing time from the people that she's with, and they know that she cares, she wants to be with them, and she's not getting distracted by work, and asking those around her, how can I help? So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Breaking Beliefs, and if there are any stories in here that you think would be good to share with others, please subscribe, like, or share this podcast with the people that you know. Thank you again for your support of this podcast, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.